I hope you are doing well at your places. So this is our part 4 of the chapter, The Enemy from Vistas, which we have also been discussing from last 3 days. Well, this one is quite lengthy. So let's begin the reading. Then we'll move to the difficult words. 28, last line of page number 28. But the servants, Sadao inquired. We must simply tell them that we intend to give him to the police. As indeed we must, Sadao. We must think of the children in your position. It would endanger all of us if we did not give this man over as a prisoner of war. Certainly, Sadao agreed. I would not think of doing anything else. Thus agreed. Together they lifted the man. He was very light, like a fowl that had been half starved for a long time, until it is only feathers and skeleton. So, his arms hanging, they carried him up to the steps and into the side door of the house. This door opened into a passage, and down the passage they carried the man towards an empty bedroom. It had been the bedroom of Sadao's father, and since his death it had not been used. They laid the man on the deeply matted floor. Everything here had been Japanese to please the old man, who would never in his own home sit on a chair or sleep in a foreign bed. Hannah went to the wall cupboards and slid back a door and took out a soft quilt. She hesitated. The quilt was covered with flowered silk and the lining was pure white silk. He is so dirty, she murmured in distress. Yes, he had better be washed, Sadao agreed. If you will fetch hot water, I will wash him. I cannot bear for you to touch him, she said. We shall have to tell the servants he is here. I will tell Yumi now. She can leave the children for a few minutes and she can wash him. Sadao considered a moment. Let it be so. He agreed. You tell Yumi and I will tell the others. But the utter pallor of the man's unconscious face moved him first to stoop and feel his pulse. It was faint, but it was there. He put his hand against the man's cold breast. The heart, too, was yet alive. He will die unless he is operated on, Sadao said, considering. The question is whether he will not die anyway. Hannah cried out in fear. Don't try to save him. What if he should live? What if he should die? Sadao replied. He stood gazing. He stood gazing down on the motionless man. This man must have extraordinary vitality or he would have been dead by now. But then he was very young, perhaps not yet 25. You mean die from the operation? Hannah asked. Yes, Sadao said. Hannah considered this doubtfully, and when she did not answer, Sadao turned away. At any rate, something must be done with him, he said, and first he must be washed. He went quickly out of the room, and Hannah came behind him. She did not wish to be left alone with the white man. He was the first she had seen since she left America, and now he seemed to have nothing to do with those whom she had known there. Here he was her enemy, a menace, living or dead. She turned to the nursery and called Yumi. But the children heard her voice and she had to go in for a moment and smile at them and play with the baby boy, now nearly 3 months old. Over the baby's soft black hair, she motioned with her mouth. Yumi, come with me. I will put the baby to bed, Yumi replied. He is ready. She went with Yumi into the bedroom next to the nursery and stood with the boy in her arms while Yumi spread the sleeping coats on the floor and laid the baby between them. Hannah led the way quickly and softly to the kitchen. The two servants were frightened at what their master had just told them. The old gardener, who was also a house servant, pulled the few hair on his upper lip. The master ought not to heal the wound of his white man. He said bluntly to Hannah. The white man ought to die. First he was shot, then the sea caught him and wounded him with her rocks. If the master heals what the gun did and what the sea did, they will take revenge on us. I will tell him what you say, Hannah replied courteously. But she herself was also frightened, although she was not superstitious as the old man was. Could it ever be well to help an enemy? Nevertheless, she told Yumi to fetch the hot water and bring it to the room where the white man was. She went ahead and slid back the partitions. Sadao was not yet there. Yumi, following, put down her wooden bucket. Then she went over to the white man. When she saw him, her thick lips folded themselves into stubbornness. I have never watched a white man, she said, and I will not watch so dirty a one now. Hannah cried at her severely. You will do what your master commands you. There was so fierce a look of resistance upon Yumi's round, dull face that Hannah felt unreasonably afraid. After all, if the servants should report something that was not as it happened. Very well, she said with dignity. You understand, we only want to bring him to his senses so that we can turn him over as a prisoner. I will have nothing to do with it, Yumi said. I am a poor person and it is not my business. Then please, Hannah said gently, return to your own work. At once, Yumi left the room, but this left Hannah with the white man alone. She might have been too afraid to stay had not her anger at Yumi's stubbornness now sustained her. Stupid Yumi, she muttered fiercely. Is this anything but a man? And a wounded, helpless man? In the conviction of her own superiority, she bent impulsively and untied the knotted rugs that kept the white man covered. When she had when she had this his breast bare, she dipped the small clean towel that Yumi had brought into the steaming hot water and washed his face carefully. The man's skin, though rough with exposure, was of a fine texture and must have been very blond when he was a child. While she was thinking these thoughts, though not really thinking, though not really liking the man better now that he was no longer a child, she kept on washing him until his upper body was quite clean, but she dared not turn him over. Where was Sadao? Now her anger was ebbing, and she was anxious again, and she rose, wiping her hands on the wrong towel, then lest the man be chilled. She put the quilt over him. Sadao, she called softly. He had been about to come in when she called. His hand had been on the door and now he opened it. She saw that he had brought his surgeon's emergency bag and that he wore his surgeon's coat. You have decided to operate? She cried. Yes, he said shortly. He turned his back to her and unfolded a sterilized towel upon the floor of the tokonoma alcove and put his instruments out upon it. Tokonoma, a niche or an alcove in a Japanese home for displaying a flower arrangement. Fetch towels, he said. She went obediently. But how anxious now! to the linen shelves and took out the towels. There ought also to be old pieces of matting so that the blood would not ruin the fine floor covering. She went out to the back veranda where the gardener kept strips of matting with inch to protect delicate shrubs on cold nights and took an armful of them. But when she went back into the room, she saw this was useless. The blood had already soaked through the packing in the man's wound and had ruined the mat under him. "Oh, the mat!" she cried. "Yes, it is ruined," Sadao replied, as though he did not care. "Help me to turn him," he commanded her. She obeyed him without a word, and he began to wash the man's back carefully. "Yumi would not wash him," she said. "Did you wash him then?" Sadao asked, not stopping for a moment his swift, concise movements. "Yes," she did. "Yes," she said. He did not seem to hear her, but she was used to his absorptions when he was at work. She wondered She wondered for a moment if it mattered to him what was the body upon which he worked so long as it was for the work he did so excellently. "You will have to give the anesthetic if he needs it," he said. "I?" she repeated blankly. "But never have I." "It is easy enough," he said impatiently. He was taking out to the packing now, and the blood began to flow more quickly. He peered into the wound with the bright surgeon's light fastened on his forehead. "The bullet is still there," he said with cool interest. "Now I wonder how deep this rock wound is. If it is not too deep, it may be there that I can get the bullet. But the bleeding is not superficial. He has lost much blood." At this moment, Hannah choked. He looked up and saw her face the color of sulphur. "Don't faint," he said sharply. He did not put down his exploring instrument. "If I stop now, the man will surely die." She clapped her hands to her mouth and leaped up and ran out of the room. Outside in the garden, he heard her retching, but he went on with his work. It will be better for her to empty her stomach, he thought. He had forgotten that, of course, she had never seen an operation. But her distress and his inability to go to her at once made him impatient and irritable with this man who lay like dead under his knife. Well, student, what happened? Now they brought the man into the room where Sadao's father used to stay because the room was empty since he died. After bringing him into the room, Sadao decided to operate him because he was heavily wounded and he had lost lots of blood. So while covering the man with the quilt, Hannah decided to wash him first. When she asked to the servant, she denied, and she had to do this work at all. Well, Sadao was not in the room by the time, and when she washed the chest portion, the upper portion of the man, Sadao entered with all the surgical instruments which were needed to help the patient. The soldier was covered with slush, so Sadao asked Hannah to bring hot water. They did not want to tell their servants about the white man. It was a crime to harbor an American. But Hannah felt they could not keep it a secret for long. They wanted to tell the servants that they would hand him over to the police as soon as the man recovered. So they decided to tell the servants about their American, as we have just discussed. Hannah went to Yumi and returned with Yumi carrying hot water. Yumi looked at the American with repulsion. She puckered her lips. She said she had never watched a white man and she would not watch that dirty American, as we have read. Hannah shouted at her, but Yumi looked stubborn. So Hannah let her go away to the children. She was angry at Yumi's stupidity. Because Hannah was trying to help the man, Despite the fact that Japanese hated American, they were just trying to help the poor men. But Yumi, the servant, replied, and she went back to the baby. Sadao returned with his surgeon's emergency bag. He turned over the wounded soldier who lay unconscious. He washed his back. He asked Hannah to help him. He wanted her to give the patient anesthetic. He removed the padding from the wound. The soldier began to bleed. Hannah had never seen an operation. She felt like vomiting. She rushed out of the room and raged. Well, students, coming on to the difficult words, pen down the difficult words of page number 29 first of all. All right. Our first word of today's reading is intent. Intent means mean or wish. When someone mean to say something, it means intended. Endanger. Our next word is endanger. It means put in danger. Next word is lifted. Lifted means carried up. Carried up or raised. Foul, as when they were carrying the body, it was light and foul. Light means which is not heavy, and foul is a kind of, it's a bird which is very light. Skeleton, we know, the bony framework of animal's body. Matted, our next word is matted. Matted means covered with mats. Next word is quilt. Hannah was trying to cover the patient with quilt. Quilt means cover for bed stuffed with soft material. Next word is lining. Lining means material used for interior covering. Our next word is distress. Distress means pain. Distress means pain. Our next word is fetch. Fetch means to bring. Our next word is considered. Considered means thought over. Our next word is utter. Utter means saying entirely. Our next word is stoop. Stoop means to bend forward. To bend forward. Our next word is vitality. Vitality means it means energy, right? Our next word is doubtfully. Doubtfully means not believing it to be true. Next word is menace. Menace means danger, risk. Our next word is bluntly. Bluntly. It means in a straightforward manner. In a straightforward manner. Our next word is courteously. Courteously means politely, mannerfully. Our next word is superstitious. Superstitious. It means having irrational beliefs. Having irrational beliefs. Next word is nevertheless. Nevertheless. It means even then. Our next word is stubbornness. Stubbornness means refusing to agree. Refusing to agree. Our next word is bring to senses. Bring to senses means make someone in a conscious state. Our next word is fiercely. Fiercely means violently. Fiercely means violently. Next word is superiority. Superiority. It means sense of being higher. Sense of being higher. Next word is impulsively. Impulsively means with sudden inclination. With sudden inclination. Next word is exposure. Exposure means leaving open. Our next word is blonde. Blonde is a color which is light golden brown. Our next word is ebbing. Ebbing. Ebbing means declining. Ebbing means declining. Our next word is anxious. Anxious means we know worried. Our next word is sterilized. This word is very common these days. Sterilized means free from germs. Our last but not the least word, alcove. Alcove means recess in the wall. Recess in the wall. And you must have seen alcove whenever you visit doctor. So pen down these words, read the chapter by your own also. All right, and we'll see or try to complete the chapter in our next video. Thank you. Utilize your time. Have a nice day.